This is Underground Over the Air.
A podcast from Monadnock Underground.
I'm Chris DiLoretto.
And I'm Zoe Roten-Heinzman.
We're here to guide you through a very special journey of entertainment. Settle back, get in your smoking jacket, and relax. This is our first episode. So tonight what we'll be bringing you is our very first dramatic performance. This is a serial comedy that reflects a lot of the realities of our time in COVID-19, particularly in a community of healers who are armed.
Following that, we have our very first interview with Dan Cesny, author of The White Mountain and the brand new book, You and Me, Reflections on Becoming Your Dad.
And then after that, we'll wrap things up with a nice, calm, little bit frantic story time. But before we get into all that, let's talk about what's new and what's going on. What do you think? So tonight, as of this recording, we just ate at Harlow's. And we were with our families, and we had to eat at separate tables, many, many feet apart. But we got to eat at Harlow's.
We did. People served us food and drink.
Yep.
We got to stay there and eat it. It was very exciting. We got to smell that Harlow's smell wafting out of the door.
Life has come back. I had tears in my eyes. It reminded me of the time a few weeks ago when I was wandering downtown, and those of you who live in Peterborough might know what I'm talking about here. I came across Forrest beating his drum on the steps of the townhouse, the seat of the realm, and I said hello, and then as I was walking away, I literally teared up because it was the first live music I had heard in like 2 months. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's kind of what 2020 is like. So what did you have?
I had a nice beer. They don't have beer on tap, but it was in a can.
Not yet.
It was
coming
okay.
back. It's coming back.
Someone brought it to me,
Go
and
to
I
Harlow's.
had it in a glass. So that was kind of exciting, thrilling. And I had a Blair Witch.
They do still. I had a Blair Witch too. They still have paper straws though.
Oh, I didn't drink my beer from a straw.
Yeah,
It didn't really occur to me.
I had a cocktail, so I was a little bit upset too because prior to COVID-19, I had been stockpiling. Like anytime I go to Dunkin' Donuts and they accidentally give me an extra straw, I had been saving them in the car for this moment. For the moment when someone gives me a paper straw, I could go to my car and get my own. And I went out there, and they were gone. I think they were stolen.
Maybe a bear did it.
Yeah, it might have been a bear. It might have been whoever took one of my hubcaps.
They like plastic.
They do.
That person.
Entity. They are a plastic-friendly thief that we have running around this dangerous neighborhood at this time. But really, there's a lot going on around town. I mean, there's rumors of coups. We don't know who's going to actually become the dictator in the end, but that is increasingly likely to happen. I mean, the betting markets in Britain have really good odds on Peterborough becoming a warlord type dictatorship in the next 5 to 10 years.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's like 3-2. It's not like overwhelming odds, but it's favorable odds.
See, I was hearing rumors about a Cunningham Pond autonomous zone today.
Well, that is going to be a question of whether or not the citizens are pushed too far. And it did almost happen. It did almost happen because, it almost happened to me. I was almost a victim. They were trying to hassle me for
having too much fun.
For having too much fun. And I just sort of told them that it really wasn't within their authority to hassle me for that, and they actually agreed. So they averted the inevitable occupation. For now. But like I said, we'll see. It's really unknown how much people will take. I mean, that's a big theme of this year, is it not?
It's true.
How much can I take? I really don't know. It's not about Cunningham Pond either. It's a lot of other things. So, a lot going on at the townhouse. Nobody's there because they all have COVID.
Yeah, I want to hear about how does that play into the coup? Is this part of the coup?
Depends on who survives.
I see.
Yeah, we don't really know. Earlier in this crisis, I was assuming that the town administrator, Rodney, would be the natural candidate to be bestowed those sort of dictatorial powers. And I just want to say for the record, if the right person is able to become dictator, I do support that, and I am an expansionist. I'm a Peterborough expansionist. I believe that we should be, over time annexing other towns, and I think that that's what the water deal with Jaffrey was really all about. I mean, we are ensuring that we are defended.
Jaffrey was the first town that came to mind when you mentioned expansion.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, it's a natural vassal, if you think about it. So there's that going on. What else do we think is happening?
Well, a lot of the news is about the Bears these days. I still haven't figured out what's going on there.
No, and I don't feel comfortable about that at all. I mean, they say that the Bears haven't killed anybody in a couple hundred years around here, but
they also say that they haven't seen this many bears in who knows how long.
Exactly. So
every time I think the sightings have died down, there's another one.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been saying for years that it's entirely possible that they're just biding their time, waiting to make their move.
One hubcap at a time.
One hubcap at a time, exactly. And as you know, I feel this way about a lot of different things. I mean, the plants included. I mean, watch out for the plants, guys.
All of nature, really.
Yes. Watch. Yes. Watch out for living things. Trust in rocks.
But I don't know. Didn't you don't you have some animal friends that you've been seeing?
Yeah, actually, I'm really very inconsistent and self-contradictory when it comes to my relationships with living beings, because I also really do love them and spend a lot of time with them. I had a really tender moment with a doe the other night. It was eating, I don't know, probably eating hostas for all I know, out of a bush in the side of the yard. And, we kind of, I told her, I said, listen, lady, you look like a llama, and you're free to be here, and I will not be in your way, and I will not disturb you. And we stood there like that, maybe 30 yards apart for, 10, 15 minutes, and there was a real moment. I had a telepathic moment with a large fly in the kitchen earlier as well. Yeah, it was, I was really kind of getting into the moment, and I saw this thing there. We don't have any fly swatters, so I picked up a trusty copy of the Monadnock Ledger transcript, which I always keep around, at least for this purpose, and I rolled it up very slowly, and I was thinking with great intention in my head towards this fly. I said, these are the last moments of your life right now. This is how it ends for you. This is the close of your story. And the fly looked at me, and this fly was flying really slowly anyway. I don't know what its problem was, but it didn't quite seem well. And it went over to the screen door like a dog would do in terms of like asking to go outside. And it buzzed horizontally back and forth in front of the screen for 5 or 10 seconds. And I was like, well, okay. And so I opened the screen door, and it flew right out. It made a deal with me. It heard me thinking that I was going to end its life. And it said, well, look, I'll make it. Listen, I hear you. But if I am willing to go outside, will you spare me? And I said, yes, that's a fair deal. I'm not out for blood, I may seem like a cold and callous individual, but I actually have a lot of compassion. But anyways, before we get into our excellent drama, we got a number of really fine voice actors that we brought in for this project. It's very, very exciting, all local. It's going to be a real treat. We just want to tell you a little bit about what's going on at Monadnock Underground itself. Now, of course, this podcast is the latest extension in our media empire, but, our focus has always been on the writing and the community around the writing. And to that end, it's been a very difficult time, probably an inopportune time for us to put out our third quarterly, which should be coming out in June, right now.
Yeah, we should be having a party tonight.
We should be having a party. Parties are banned. Parties are prohibited. We can't do that. And in the absence of a party, why make a magazine? We're making the magazine for the party, for Christ's sakes. But, to compensate for that, we actually do have a couple of plans. A number of things that are going to come out at the end of the summer. Just tell the folks about what we've got cranking here.
We have 2 print collections. We're working on one of spiritual writing, particularly post-COVID or during COVID, spiritual writing, kind of looking at, everyone's talking about we can't go back to the way things used to be after this crisis. But what does that mean? We'd love to know. Everyone would love to know. We'd love to know what our writers are thinking about that, especially from a spiritual perspective. And then we have one that's just no real motive behind this one except to just publish some good sci-fi and fantasy.
Yeah, I got a soft spot for that stuff, and frankly, if there's any time to be imagining things, whether they are things that we can practically apply or they are just things to help us escape. This is very valuable. This is the time. This is the time for that. Not to be cruel, but we've put a very, very draconian deadline on this, and frankly, I don't know when this episode is going to come out. So it may be a matter of days between the time you hear this and the time of the actual deadline. But basically, we're looking for submissions to come in by the solstice, which is the 20th. We know that's impossible, so we'll make a deal with you. If you got a really good idea, go ahead and reach out to us by the 20th. If we accept your pitch, we'll give you an extra couple weeks to write it. But act fast, though. Don't wait on this. Don't sleep on this. We have more submissions at this point than I think we know what to do with. I think I got like 3 more submissions while we were eating dinner tonight. So act now. Act now. Get in on this. The third thing that we're going to have coming out at the end of the summer is I wrote another book. And that's
Chris
all.
wrote a book during lockdown.
Yeah.
Like, all those memes that we're all supposed to be bettering ourselves that we all scoffed at. Well, he wrote a book. He did it.
Well, everybody thinks I just post angry screeds on Facebook, but I save my best material for the book. And so we'll give you more information about that as it gets closer. It's still kind of it's not a secret, but there's not that many people that know about it. Title's under wraps, but we got plans. I mean, the first draft is out there. I'm writing the second draft now, and that will be coming out as well. Besides those things, what you can expect is that this program is going to come out once every couple of weeks. We're going to have public episodes. We're going to do a season. It's going to be about 8 public episodes.
Subscribers to our Patreon will get bonus episodes that include outtakes, behind-the-scenes stuff, extra footage from interviews that don't make it into the final episodes. So you should check us out at patreon.com/Monadnock Underground.
Yeah, you got it. And the way that this works is, we got a few different tiers on there, but basic tier is $5, and that gets you those bonus episodes. That'll give you weekly Underground over-the-air episodes, more or less. Don't hold us to exactly weekly. We operate on kind of a looser sort of Mediterranean kind of time scale around here. So we're not looking at exact measurements. But in any case, that's the idea, is that you're going to have material from us on the podcast side of things about once a week if you're a subscriber. That's not all you get, actually, though. This is the digital tier of our subscription. So anything that we put out on a print basis, whether that's a book like the books that we're discussing, whether that's a quarterly magazine, all of that stuff is available via PDF for free before general release for any of our $5 and up patrons. Now, of course, you want to go up from there. $10 is a print subscription, and that's going to get you automatic access, again, before the general public, to all print releases, in addition to the digital copies and the free bonus subscriber podcast episodes. If you want to donate more than that, that's what really gets you into heaven. So check us out, patreon.com/Monadnock Underground, to access all of that.
For all of our subscription tiers, what you're paying for besides heavenly access, wonderful podcast episodes, and or print copies, digital copies of our books, is that we are really proud that we pay all of our writers for our print projects. It's not much, but it's something that's been important to us from day one, and we couldn't do that without our patrons. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the truth. Is even with what we're able to charge in terms of like a cover price, we lose money on these print publications, and the only reason for that, print costs are real, and that's nothing to scoff at. But we could make up those print costs pretty easily just by sales. What we can't pay for is our art director, our cover artist, and all of our writers, and we really would like to pay them more. So really, the more income that we receive, the more we can throw towards that. It's very important. But we can't do that without subscribers, nor can we do this program. That's our spiel. And with that, why don't we, what do you think? Should we go over to our dramatic program, Healer Wars?
Let's do it.
All right, we'll catch you guys at the Other Side Cafe. This is Healer Wars, a tale of the COVID and crime.
I always wake up every day and ask myself if I think I can handle what's coming my way, and then I answer yes. And let me tell you a little secret. So far, I've never been wrong. I bet a lot of you guys out there are feeling like the world's gone a bit sideways. But one thing I've always found is that when life gets crazy or gives you lemons, only thing to do is just keep driving the truck. Little did I know, just 14 short months ago, seems like a lifetime, when I started out on a lifetime dedicated to public service at age 52, what an interesting inside look I'd have at how they fry the sausage in a town like this one during a pandemic. Oh, I'm Mindy Fitchburg, by the way. I'm so excited I forgot to say that. I always forget things when I get excited, although I forget things other times too. I'm here to cheer you up in the hard times of COVID-19 with some fun tales and stories from a special little town called Peterborough, where our lives are better than what you're used to, I'm sure. When I decided to throw my shoe in the ring all those months ago to run for the opportunity to serve our town as fence viewer, you should have seen the haters. They called me crazy. They said I was unqualified. They asked if I wanted to be fence viewer out of love for surveying or construction. No, sir. They asked me if I had any special feelings about property rights or traditions. Not a bit. They asked what I thought about the fact that most places don't actually elect or utilize a fence viewer anymore. And I told them, well, then maybe we shouldn't have one either. Why are you running for fence viewer? They asked me after all that. To serve this town, I said. Crazy and unqualified, they called me. Well, as it turns out, I was sure qualified to be the only one on the ballot for the position. I realized when they read off the vote totals to reveal that I had defeated my 4 write-in challengers by 17 votes in an unprecedented contest to be the town's 64th fence viewer. I realized right then and there that if I hadn't stepped up and done my public duty, nobody might have been elected fence viewer after all. That was just the beginning of it. Some other time I'll tell you about how I had to learn what a fence viewer is supposed to do. But first I'll give you the good stuff. Suddenly I had the inside story on everything that goes on here just cracked wide open. I realized I could be the voice of the average person, the advocate, and I can give my constituents the information I have. I don't know if you guys know this, but beneath the surface, all those healing and wellness people, they fight over territory, turf, like gangs, like the Bloods and the Crips, the Latin Kings. Not quite that bad. They're quieter about it. It's all beneath the surface. But you don't know what they're like. It's vicious. Everybody keeps it hidden, even the people outside that world who can see it, because it's just better that most people don't know. Someone once told me, I think the words they used were that it would shock the system, and I'm inclined to agree. But I'm going to tell you guys about this anyway. The more yoga studios and massage places and holistic healing guru chakras you have in a given town, the more likely it is that that sinister kind of violence is just there simmering, just lurking beneath the surface. And this is a town with a lot of healers, and it comes out. As a public official, let me tell you, it comes out. What I'm about to tell you is happening in real time, 2 months ago, right at the beginning of the lockdown. I'll start by introducing you to one of our biggest healers, one of the stars of the town, at least if you're that kind of person, Laurel Hills.
Hello, everyone out there in Facebook land. Here we are for our first virtual Friday Frequency Fellowship. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. When we are not shut down as a non-essential business, we can gather in a much more meaningful and intimate way to bring the frequency of our vibrations to a higher level. But we'll try this out and see if we can tap into that higher frequency energy today, even when we're apart. Oh, I see that you're here, Jean. Thank you for joining me. Hello, Nancy. Let's take another breath all together and we'll just wait a few more moments before we begin. Inhale, just... while we're waiting to see if a few others join in, I'd like to just state that the healing arts and spirituality, these are essential, and we really should remember that. The work that we do here is essential. The Reiki that I offer to my clients, to all of you, it's just as important to their health, to your health, as the Western medicine that is being unquestionably supported right now. And I mean, that is important too. Our healthcare professionals are true heroes, of course, but healing arts should be included in the healthcare spectrum. Really, it is just a social justice issue of, hi, Elaine, welcome. I see there's a few more of you trickling in. You're streaming in now. So let's center ourselves. Let's center ourselves and let's begin. Just take a deep breath. The center is the middle. And let's remember, let's breathe deeply and bring into our lungs all of the healing power of the cosmos. And then with our out breaths, we banish the virus from our bodies, our town, and the world. Breathe in the health and breathe out the COVID. In with the health and out with the COVID. Our breaths are like the magical antiviral white sage of Avalon. Just big cleansing clouds of spirit and disease-killing sage smoke. Just breathe in that health and breathe out that disease-killing sage. Let's heal the planet. Now, if we can get our DNA vibing higher, we could really find a cure for almost anything right here in our very own breath. Breathe in and start to picture yourself in the woods, away from all of the disrupting frequencies. No cell phones, no 5G, no... What is that? Oh. My internet connection is weak. Okay, on top of everything else. Hello? Hello? My internet connection. I'm so sorry, friends. I'm having connection issues. All right, well, let's try again next week. Center ourselves. We'll try again next week. Namaste. Oh, this is the worst. And Elaine was watching too. If I don't watch my back, that bitch will stick a knife in it long before COVID can ever get to me. I bet she's going to pull some bullshit and try to use this pandemic to get one over on me and everyone else. I bet she thinks she can brand herself as the wise grandmother of coronavirus. And the worst part is, people might just eat that up, unless I push back. Okay, all right, though. You know what? Namaste. Namaste. Deep breath. Breathe deep, deep breaths. Laurel, just... the peace. Breathe the goddess. Breathe the goddess without into the goddess within. And peaceful thoughts. Gandhi consciousness. Peaceful thoughts. I'm going to walk over there and see what's really going on. And I swear if she's not careful, she's going to be the one who's going to worry about her back.
You don't even know the half of it. You don't. This is just the beginning. Heck, I didn't even know the half of it until recently. I haven't even lived here that long. But you know, a girl hears things. especially a girl who's the town's fence viewer. That's right, this girl. A few years ago, my daughter, who's really cool, taught me a new word I really like. It's called frenemy. Maybe you've heard it, but don't feel bad if you don't get it. She had to explain it to me like 4 times, and then I had to sleep on it for a couple days. But it's actually really simple. Just a combination of the word friend and the word enemy. Frenemy. So, sometimes you get along with somebody and maybe even spend a lot of time with them, but secretly you really just want to cut a bitch and you're waiting for the right time. But you also want to be there to comfort them in the hard times and give them a hug when they need one. You know what that's like. Anyway, I'm not just totally off on a tangent. Laurel and Elaine are the absolute best of frenemies. That's what you don't even understand. This goes back years. Years. Back to even before Elaine delivered Laurel's child. That's right. Elaine was a midwife for years. I guess she might still have a few baby cranking tricks up her pant leg, but for whatever reason, she mostly focuses on the dead these days. You know, talking to the dead. She's the musical medium, and she calls herself that because she does music and sound therapy, therapy with sound instruments, and she also acts as a medium, talking to dead people. And I think sometimes she does both at the same time. Isn't that funny? She went from doing birth to doing death. Funny what people do. She used to kind of be a mentor to Laurel before and after the kid was born, teaching her different tricks of the trade and business tips and stuff like that. Nobody really knows when things went sour between them. Well, everybody knows. It's just that everybody knows a different thing. Some people think it was when Laurel opened up her own studio, but I don't buy it. Laurel does meditation and Reiki and massage and stuff like that. I just don't think there's any overlap. She's a Reiki dealer. That's what she calls herself. It's not really competition. It's not the same market. I think it goes deeper, and I have my own theories. But anyway, it's been like this for years. If nothing else, I think everybody agrees Laurel still has to be a little jealous of Elaine's operation. She's still the king shit healer around these parts, no matter what anybody does to challenge her. Laurel's tucked away in the Guernsey building. A nice studio, I've seen it, it's nice. But it's still just the Guernsey building, anybody can get in there. It's half empty all the time. Elaine's home base is totally the most coveted healer real estate in 3 counties. The ornate, magical attic space above the 12 Pine shop. It's actually the old train station from back when there were trains. Funny to think that there were trains. The tracks might not be there anymore, and it's a super quick walk from Laurel's studio to Elaine's posh salon. But I think she probably feels like she's crossing the train tracks, if you know what I mean.
Something is definitely up with Elaine. I know she usually does her song seance today, and nothing on Facebook about it being canceled or moving to Zoom. Nothing about anything. Just quietly lurking on my videos. I wouldn't be surprised if she starts muscling in on my clients, too. That's probably what she's up to. She's calling them right now, filling their heads with ideas about how my online spirit cybers are not real spirituality because there's electronics. I am just trying to follow the rules. Well, I'm headed over there right now, and I don't care what spirits she's got lurking around. If there are more than 10 persons, spirits included, in that song seance, or if they are an inch closer than 6 feet from each other, I'm busting the whole thing up for our safety. Oh, my God, and here comes Tristan. I'd better put my mask on.
Laurel! Staying fit, keeping the body alive, I see. Ugh. Gotta stay flexible in all kinds of ways during these uncertain times.
Hi, Tristan.
Hey, you should tune into my Facebook Live tonight. I'm doing a free Ashtanga session, a little teaser of what I have available for distance yoga classes. Open to all, of course, my way of giving back to the community.
Of course, yeah, maybe.
Mm, you do need to be able to handle high speed video. The flow sessions move between poses pretty quickly, so not everyone's internet connection can handle it.
Ugh, you heard about that. Amanda was watching a movie and video chatting with friends, okay? My connection can handle it. She knows not to do that again when I'm holding my sessions.
Yeah, distance healing must be quite a challenge. How does Reiki even work? Like, virtually? Isn't that impossible?
The universal energy flows no matter how far apart we are. I find it's a matter of becoming less focused merely on what's going on with the body and more on tapping into the ultimate source.
Hmm. All I know is that I'm grateful I already have so much business with the video subscriptions. Yoga is something that people find essential, even if the state doesn't. I'm also getting started on a yoga at home series for kids. If you ever need something for Amanda to do while you're healing, a little warrior pose, a little Vrkashana. Ah.
Okay, Tristan, we're in the middle of the sidewalk. I get the idea. It's just,
See, that's the thing, Laurel. When you're in tune with the glorious vessel you were given to experience this earth with, you sometimes just have to move. Ah.
right. Yes. Well, thank you for the demo, and I am just going to move in the direction of my own errands now. Namaste, Tristan.
Ah, always one word we can agree on. Namaste, Laurel.
Laurel? Well, for Nirvana's sake, what are you doing here? Is everything all right?
Um, I heard you singing.
Well, I usually am. I'd invite you in, but...
Mama picked a hell of a time to teach us a lesson, didn't she?
Well, darling, remember what Gandalf said to Frodo.
I know. Silly Frodo, you dumbass. You don't get to pick the times you live in, but you gots to do the things for the times, etc., etc.
That's pretty good. I know I told you that 1,000 times years back, but you rarely listened to me. And I know you're no Tolkien fan.
I've seen the memes. So, what's the actual rules here? Are we allowed to be talking like this?
Hell if I know. You didn't bring any 5G with you, did
What?
you?
I don't think so.
I'm joking. Half joking, I think. I don't know what 5G is. I just know it's bad.
What that's got to do with the rules?
I don't know, darling. I'm just spitballing here. We're all doing the best we can with what the goddess gave us. But I mean, seriously, how fucked are we?
At least we aren't old. Well, I'm not.
Maybe not old, but you're definitely a bitch.
Elaine, how dare you?
You know I've always loved you anyway. I'm just not so sure it always goes both ways.
Oh, you're so full of shit.
No, I'm just worried about the fact that I have a business that requires in person contact, and you should be worried too, since we're in the same business.
I've already started online sessions.
Yes, I know. I saw just now. It was good. For a first attempt, anyway.
Every compliment has to be backhanded with you. You should know that I came over here in the first place to check on you and to see how you were doing.
Oh, thank you, dear. My chakras are aligned, my bones are at peace, and I'm losing my shit. I might have to dip into my safety Klonopin.
You still have that?
I don't take it much because I practice what I preach. You should try doing that sometime. But Yeah, I would lose my shit completely if I didn't always know it was there. You want one?
You know, I do practice what I preach more often than you would think. You just think I'm like frozen in time, like I'm incapable of growing without your, tutoring or whatever, and I am doing just fine. But maybe, yeah, I would like a clone.
They're all at the house. But if you come stand in my doorway again tomorrow, I might be able to roll one to you across the floor. You didn't by chance see Tristan in your travels across Grove Street, did you?
Funny you say that. Yeah, actually, just now we walked a little ways together.
6 feet apart, I hope. That son of a bitch.
He is a son of a bitch. He was wearing his galaxy leggings and doing ridiculous stretches right on the sidewalk like a douche.
Jesus, you don't even get it. Don't you get what he's up to?
What? No?
Did he say what he was doing?
I just told you I saw what he was doing, stretching like a.
Like a douche, yes. But what did he say? Did he say why? Or where he might be going?
I, I mean, I didn't ask him.
Of course not. And of course he didn't say anything, did he?
I have no idea what you're getting at. Can you stop being a mystical middle aged lady with long curly half gray hair for 2 minutes and just talk to me like a regular person?
Are we regular people?
Of course we are. I mean, no, not really. Not at all. But just for 5 goddamn minutes, Elaine. This is the pandemic. For Ahura Mazda's sake.
Okay. Did it occur to you maybe he was actually on his way somewhere and stopped when he saw you coming and the whole stretching like a douche thing was a ruse?
Oh my god, no. Are you paranoid? Why would I assume that? Where the hell would he be going? I didn't really bother to care where he was going because I was coming to see you.
Yes. Well, while you were busy worrying about gathering intel on your former mentor, current rival, our mutual antagonist is likely busy establishing himself back behind Putnam Park.
Doing what?
Doing yoga. What the hell else does he do?
You know, I don't even give a shit if he is doing yoga. You do need a fucking Klonopin, and I might need another Klonopin just from talking to you. The fuck is wrong with you, Elaine? Have you taken your goddamn temperature?
You really don't get it. Here's what that son of a bitch is doing. While you and I are losing our shirts and fucking around with this online, go to Zoom, Facebook Live clusterfuck, he's going to do exclusive private sessions up by the old dam and rake in a fortune. By the time this is over, he's going to have all our people with his warmed over charlatanism.
Oh, please, he wouldn't do that. Maybe he would do that. He probably would do that. Oh, Gaia, help me. I'll cut off his balls.
You saw him just now?
Yeah, like just now.
Come on, let's go.
Where are we going?
To nip this shit in the bud.
Isn't there some network of secret trails back here? This does not seem like a trail.
Haven't you heard of the element of surprise?
Okay, but I didn't bring my cedar oil or my agate charm.
Do you need to take your temperature? We're looking for Tristan, not conducting a ritual. Please try and stay with me here.
No, to repel ticks. If I get a tick bite, I don't think I can go to my herbalist because I don't think she's an essential business either. And oh, it is all just so awful and unfair.
Pull yourself together, Laurel. Fair. You really never have listened to a word I've said to you. Come on, breathe, like you're always telling everyone else to do. Get it the fuck together.
center is the middle. The center is the middle. Okay. I'll just smudge and diffuse some oils to repel ticks when I get home. Guess there will be some justice if we catch Tristan.
There you go. But you need to get something straight. This isn't about justice or fairness. This is about us surviving to eat another day. It's easier because Tristan's so repulsive, but I don't care who's in my way. Oh, shh.
There he is. There he is. He is doing yoga in the woods. Oh my goddess, Elaine, you were right.
And you were right about those galaxy leggings. Who to help us?
Guys, I know you're both well trained in the mystical high arts, but invisibility isn't one of your powers.
Bullshit. He can see through it because he has powers of his own.
So can he see us or not? What do we do now?
I can see and hear you. You are right over there.
Should we just go talk to him?
Yes. Unless you're hiding or whatever from someone else.
All right. You've won this one. But we've got you in a compromised position as well.
How so? I'm well within my rights to be limber in the woods. You two field scouts or whatever are the ones who aren't social distancing. Look at me, minding my own business.
Oh shit, he's right. Look at us.
Stay strong. Don't be such a child. Don't tell me you're falling for that limber in the woods bullshit.
I mean, I'm looking around and not seeing anything to indicate the contrary.
You can't pull one over on me, kid. I don't care how many ayahuasca retreats you've been on. It'd take you 3 lifetimes to see half the shit I've seen in my day. And what I see now is you, in the woods, limber and full of shit. I want to know what you're up to.
Shit, Laurel. You're too nice to be hanging out with this woman. She's mean.
Trust me, I know better than anybody. Crystal's on her.
You're goddamn right. I'm a mean old bitch. Now tell me what I want to know before I make an ionic reverberation at you that'll throw your limber back out for a week.
Jesus Christ. All right. Oh, you think we're in the mean streets of Eureka Springs or some shit, not the path behind Putnam Park in Peterborough.
These are strange times, Tristan. And I don't know what you've read about Eureka Springs, but I was the number 2 lover to the vice mayor in 1973. So, yeah.
I said all right. No need to rub my nose in it. I'm supposed to be meeting someone, but she didn't show up. Crime not committed. She was supposed to be here half an hour ago.
Who is she?
You don't know her.
I know everybody.
No, really, you don't know this one. Here, check out her card.
Devi Moonbeam, MBA, Certified Mystic Analyst specializing in spiritual startups and restructuring. What in the Gandhi does that mean?
It means we got a problem.
We already have lots of problems. You mean we have more problems?
She's right, Laurel. That's why I agreed to meet her. I figured I had to before she marks me off to be put down, like that book. You ever read that book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman? Wild shit.
Focus, Tristan. Tell me everything you know about her.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Something else. It's worse than you think. She's cracked the ley lines. She's got the whole geographical grid figured out. And she's got it wired too.
Great host of the Demiurge, just as I'd always feared. Devi Moonbeam.
MBA.
Gosh, well, that doesn't sound too good. I don't know what it all means. I don't even really go in for any of this stuff. I'm with what they call the Western medicine. Getting stabbed with hundreds of needles and all that Chinese torture stuff ain't for me. But whatever floats your boat. It almost seems mean to have to leave on a note like that, because now you're just gonna have to wonder and wonder what all this means and what's gonna happen and who's gonna end up as the kingpin or the queen pin, goddess pin. We're out of time though, so tune in next time when we finally get to meet this mysterious sorceress in business attire. Toodaloo!
Healer Wars was written, directed, and produced by Zoe Roten-Heinsman and Chris DiLoretto. Mindy Fitchburg is voiced by Greta Cushman. Laurel Hills is voiced by Nicole Boscheman. Tristan LaFleur is voiced by Eddie Gomez II. And Elaine Street is voiced by Tab McLean. Join us next time. All right, listeners, we've got here with us live today in our Zoom studio, pre-recorded a couple weeks ago, the author of 2018's The White Mountain, the co-founder of The Hippo, the author of the upcoming The Father's Day book of 2020, You and Me, Reflections on Becoming Your Dad, and the preeminent author in the state of New Hampshire, whose name begins with 4 consonants, Dan Cesny. Dan, welcome to Underground Over the Air.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow, what a buildup that was. Yeah, I definitely need to buy some vowels for sure. Yeah, I couldn't be happier to be here though.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the things we were just saying, so this book comes out, is it June 2nd is the official date?
June 2nd, we're going to launch it. We're going to virtually launch it with Gibson's Bookstore out of Concord, New Hampshire. Gibson's has launched every single one, all 7 of my books. So there's no reason to not virtually launch it this time. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. You got to keep the consistency, even in the wildly inconsistent times.
Yes. We'll see how it goes.
Well, what's great is that probably people will be hearing this right before the book actually comes out. So if it is before that date, you will be able to pre-order still, but you may be coming in right in time to actually get it after.
Hey, that's fine. In this crazy time we're in, any press is good press, right?
Absolutely. So we at Monadnock Underground did a little kickoff campaign to try to promote the book, and one of the we feel very honored and connected to this book in a sense because we had the opportunity to run some of the essays that Dan was compiling, some of which were fresh from November 2019. He was posting on his Facebook page, but then we started digging into some of the archives ones from past Novembers, and it's a real treat. So before we kick things off, I just want to say, kind of like I was just saying before, but I want everybody to know this. This is a book that Dan has written of essays that are addressed to his daughter. And the first 5 years of her life, and the book is divided into 5 parts, each centered around one chronological year, and each assigned to a Chinese element. So we'll talk about the elements and stuff a little bit more in a minute, but first I just want to say, and I've said this to you before, this is a tremendous gift to your daughter. I mean, your daughter has a treasure now that you will always have, that can never be taken away, and that's amazing to me. And as a father, this is an amazing book that really just brings to life the diverse but very meaningful experiences of the day-to-day, moment-to-moment of being a dad. But this is not a book just for daughters and fathers. This is a very, very beautiful book. It is a profound look at all of life and the way that we live and the way that we relate to one another and the way one generation passes to another. This is a treasure for everybody. So everybody should get this book.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody should get this book. Thank you. Geez, I appreciate that. It's funny, she's, Uma is now, she's old enough. She's 5 and, coming up on 5.5. And, she's, well, you two know this. She's at that age now where she's starting to be like sort of cognizant of what I do, and the fact that, okay, like I talk to people and I write about her and, she's not, I've read some things to her, but she's not quite there yet. And I'm looking forward to the teen years when she entirely rejects everything that I've done and and despises me for doing this for about a decade. And I'm hoping to be around long enough that she comes back.
I was going to say
and
she'll come back.
Appreciates what I've done. Yeah, that's what I'm shooting for. But thank you. Yeah, it was it was a conscious decision to make it basically a set of epistolary essays, addressed specifically to her. And I didn't want that happened pretty organically. The first couple of years that I was writing essays to her, I didn't have any book in my head, and I wasn't doing that the November essay challenge that I was doing. So, they were all over the place. So when I went back to put the book together, I had to actually pull everything into the proper tense, which is that was the most work that I had to do, was to actually get all of the essays consistent. And so I hope, knock on wood, I hope I did it. So we'll see. There'll be, if I missed it once, somebody is going to send me an email and say, hey, on page 42, you addressed the reader instead of her. You screwed up the whole book. So we'll see.
I didn't catch anything like
how that goes. All right.
Does that really happen though? Do you get that kind of email?
Are you kidding? So for the White Mountain, the White Mountain is in its 4th printing,
which is amazing. Congratulations.
Which is amazing in and of itself. And but for every printing, I've cleaned up typos and I've cleaned up little small things. Fortunately, no history. I haven't gotten any facts wrong or any background, or I haven't spelled anybody's name wrong or anything like that. But things like, I will literally get an email from someone saying, hey, I loved your book, but the 4th graph on page 110, you need a comma right after the because. And I'm like, oh, damn, I do need a comma there, son of a gun. So,
well, people are reading it though. They're reading it
exactly.
Closely. They're paying attention.
I am a very thick-skinned writer. It's all a collaboration, and if somebody can find something, I read this thing. You know how it is, Chris. You read a book, and you read your own words so many times that at some point you can't. It's impossible to find anything wrong with it. It's just words. So I'm really glad when people actually take the time to do that. It's not, once or twice someone, will give you a bad review, or like I've had reviews say things like, oh, I'm only giving him 1 star because when I ordered the book, it took like 2 months for it to arrive on my door. So the book gets 1 star. You get stuff like that's just junk. But yeah, I appreciate it. And we're gonna, at some point, what I think would be funny to do is like have people go back and be like, we'll do a raffle, we'll do a contest, right? Like go back to the 1st edition and see if you can find the differences between the 1st and the 4th edition.
Oh, that's a good contest.
Yeah.
I've actually always wondered things like that about just books in general that I have. When I see them, like, well, I wonder what the difference is if I get, if I get a used copy of the first printing. I've never actually gone looking for any, but
yeah. Well, my journalism professor that I had said 1 mistake for every 10,000 words. That's the average is one typo per 10,000 words. If you're at that level, you're doing fine. Try to keep it to 1 typo per 10,000 words. So
that makes
that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, I get that. So you've got years 1 through 5 at Earth, Fire, Metal, Water.
Yeah.
And how did you make those assignments?
That's a really good question. Well, a couple of the essays already played into that to begin with.
Okay.
I did an essay about the wood essay is her finding that tree trunk and us counting the thing. So that was wood. That made sense for the wood. And then the metal essay was already there. That was the playground that we found in the Upper Peninsula and the big steamship coming through Lake Superior. So that was already there. So that stuff was already there. And I knew that I was going to divide the book into into 5 sections because it made sense. Again, it made sense to do it chronologically because I'm telling a story. This is the story of her life told to her. So it made sense for it to be literally from day 1 to it ends on about her birthday at year 5. So it's there's a narrative arc to the book. So all I had to figure out was what those sections meant, right? And I already had 2, right? I already had the metal, and I had that and that. And I think maybe I forget, is the first section is fire. Like one of those essays talks a lot about
First
like the second one. So as soon as I hit fire, I thought, oh, okay, there's the 4 elements, right? I have the 4 elements, but there's 5 sections, so I needed to find 5 elementals instead of 4 elements.
Sure.
So I had to go to Asia to do that.
Yeah.
I had to go to China to find that. And something I'm sure you're aware of, the Nepalese prayer flags, the Tibetan Buddhism prayer flags, those actually represent 5 elements. So that those 5 elements are very common in lore, and they harken back to half of who she is, because she is half Nepali, right? My wife is Nepalese, so culturally speaking, it made sense to.
I thought that, yeah,
to do that. And the cover, by the way, is the Chinese fan. The artwork of the Chinese shell symbol of the Chinese fan.
I didn't pick up on that. That's awesome.
That's a little harder to do.
That's cool.
But I wanted a lot of the book. A lot of the essays have to do with celebrating Dasein and Tika and her holidays. Her family's holidays. So it made sense to frame it like that.
Zoe?
You stole my main question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So I was surprised, and I think this is at the end, so jumping to the end, but I was surprised to read that you said that you struggle with mindfulness and staying in the present, which is surprising to me because this whole book seems, it seems like this book is just rooted in your ability to be mindful from day 1 of Uma's birth. It starts right there, and you're right there with her. So I'm wondering if you want to say anything more about that. Do you have a mindfulness practice or another spiritual practice?
I do. I don't think it's. I didn't write in this book about it. I think I may have written about it. But I have suffered from sort of clinical anxiety for most of my life, and one of the sort of strategies with dealing with anxiety is to pull yourself into the moment. I spent many years in therapy dealing with my anxiety issues. So when Uma was born, as from the introduction, we had a real scare on her birthday. Mina's pregnancy was absolutely perfect. She was literally going to the gym 2 weeks before she gave birth. There was no issues. There was no sort of immunocompromised issues. Everything was like textbook. And then on the day during her Uma's birth, Mina had a hemorrhage and she almost died. And it threw everything into chaos. And it required. It lasted for several weeks, and there was a whole bunch of surgeries, and we had to bring her parents here from Chicago to help us with the house, and I basically lived at Elliott Hospital for 3 weeks. I was like sleeping in the in the waiting room, and I write, and in that first essay I write about how I didn't know it then, but that first day, those first couple of weeks would mess with my sleeping patterns probably for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And I still suffer from insomnia. 5 years later, I'm still suffering from insomnia. And it's almost like, I don't want to compare myself to veterans, but it's a lot like PTSD when you go through something like that. And
trauma is trauma, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and Mina's is just, she's so tough and she's so strong, and she jokes about it because she was unconscious for most of it. What did she know? She wasn't dealing with it. We were.
Right.
So I tease her a lot about that. But so anyway, getting back to the mindfulness. So I I had no choice. That was the only way that I could get through it, was to write. It was my therapy. I had no, like I say in the introduction, I did not set out to write this book. That was not, and even up until the last couple of years, I didn't intend to write a book. But I had nothing else. I had to internalize my life for months at the early part of Uma's birth. Mina wasn't recovered it took her 4.5 months before she was even able to get back to 70 or 80%. Wow. In and out of the hospital. There was a lot of surgeries and operations, and all this time I had a newborn. I was dealing with the newborn and all the paperwork and all the hospital visits and all that stuff. So if you asked me sort of what was happening in the world in like the first 4 months of 2015, I have no clue whatsoever. Because there was no other world for me except hospitals and my journal, which I was writing in every day. And I wasn't just writing essays. I probably wrote 100,000 words in a month in wow. that first year, because that's all I had. Yeah. That's how I was processing the trauma and all the stress and all the anxiety. So that is sort of again, I wouldn't have called it mindfulness at the time. I would have called it therapy. But that was sort of my mindful practice, was whenever I started panicking, I would just open my book and I would start writing. And that's where all those essays came from. And because my wife is very popular and has a lot of friends, unlike myself, there was a lot of people who wanted to know how she was doing. And I didn't have the ability to like be on the phone and to be calling people and to be talking. I just didn't. I couldn't do it. It wasn't part of. It would be too depressing. I would fall apart every time I talked to someone. So what I tended to do then would be to transfer a lot of that writing to social media, and that was sort of a way for me to be able to let her friends and our family know what was happening and how things were going. And what I discovered as I was doing that was that we weren't alone, that this was not unusual what we were going through, that like, as Chris mentioned, the awesomeness of the mundane, that's what I began picking up on, was something that a lot of other parents, and not just parents, just a lot of other people were able to relate to and to look at life in a different way. It's really easy to be awestruck by the Grand Canyon. Anybody can do that. Sure. But it's entirely different to find that same sense of wonder, in a kid throwing up on you, and for the longest time, that's all I had. I had no Grand Canyon, so I had to find my Grand Canyon, so to speak. And that was through diaper changes and through nursing my wife back to health and through, all those really weird middle of the night, spending time with Uma in the rocking chair at 3 a.m., and I didn't have anything else. So I turned to that as a mindful practice, and I've tried to maintain it. I think I appreciate what you're saying, Chris, but I think anybody who says that they are mindful they're the ones who are lying.
I don't disagree with you.
I think mindfulness is generally, mindfulness for me has been, it's like a treadmill. I can never. I'm always running toward it, but I'm never reaching it.
I can definitely relate to that. Absolutely. So actually, this might be a good point. I think you might have brought a couple of pieces today that our listeners would love to hear a little sneak preview of what's in here. And,
I would love to.
If my pep talk didn't get them to already be clicking over to buy the book, I suspect the excerpts here.
Well, thank you, man. I was I debated what to bring, but I wanted to, and it's funny that it's really interesting that you mentioned mindfulness, because both of these pieces have to do with mindfulness. And neither of them, and both of these are new, right? So I brought a section of the introduction. I figured, this would be a good way to introduce people to the book. And then I brought a section of one of my favorite essays, which is my Bread is Life essay, which is Uma baking bread for the first time. And this is an older piece. So the introduction comes from the very beginning, and then the Bread is Life one comes when she's 4.5 years old. And I'll read the introduction one, and then we can talk more, and then I'll read the Bread is Life one.
That sounds great.
So this is from the introduction of the book, and I won't read the whole thing. I'll just read a little snippet here.
Sure.
Is this the time that I read this out loud? This might be the first time I read it out loud, so that'll be interesting. So here we go. I never set out to write a book about my daughter, and many would say this book is about me, not her. My intention originally was to keep a journal from her, from day one on, a way that someday she'd be able to look back on her life through my eyes. I wanted to just write her history for her. But life has a way of changing your plans. On the day she was born, my wife Mina had a postpartum hemorrhage. In about 20 minutes' time, we went from mama time with our newborn to emergency surgery. There was a whole world of unknowns exploding in my head as I sat in the nursery, trying to engage my baby daughter. The nurses there, desperate to take my mind off the terrible blow fate appeared to be handing us. In the weeks and months of uncertainty and recovery that followed, I began to turn to that journal as a way of both recording the events unfolding for my future daughter, but also as a way to help me deal, and indeed to try to heal. As it sometimes does, my writing became therapeutic. I post photos and snippets on social media as parents do, and would engage with our friends and family that came together to help in those early days. And we began to realize that we weren't alone, that birth wasn't as easy and romantic as it was often portrayed, that we, in many ways, got lucky. We were still together, fighting, getting better, day after sometimes painful day. Through the words, I began to see a collection of parents and guardians and family forming that had the same questions about life, the same sense of something bigger than themselves, filtered through the everyday work of diapers and teething, filtered through the pain of scraped knees and broken bone. Writing about the wonders and agony of parenting became a way for me to channel my own creativity toward questions I've long held about philosophy and spirituality, and indeed our role in our own lives and in the lives of others. Parenting became a sort of religion, and I became an eager student. I wrote directly to my daughter, like an epistolary novel, to her about her life. We became parents at an older age, and someday maybe she'd be able to hear my voice through these letters. As time went on, the passages became longer and more complex. As she grew and changed and learned, so did I. The questions became deeper, the answers less certain, and a critical understanding of my role in her life, and by association, my life, began to emerge. That I had to become content with not knowing and with finding joy and awe in the glorious mess of parenting, where the next day, sometimes the next minute, offers yet another unknown, where there is rarely a roadmap. I came to look forward to these bouts of not knowing, excited, in fact, about the next thing to learn, the next tidal wave of organic information, accepting that the next day will bring yet another challenge, and that I couldn't possibly predict what that would be, became calming, in fact, like the purest form of living mindfully. This was the ultimate way of living in the moment.
And that's a great way to start things off. Yeah, absolutely. And having read it, that sums it up. I mean, that's a great way to get the reader into it. And actually, just to follow up on that, I think it is an introductory related type thing, but Fire, the title essay of the second portion of the thing. Really hard to pick a favorite essay in this whole thing, but if I had to pick one, I think it might be Fire.
You like that one?
I really, really like that one. And I could talk a lot about that one, but one thing I just wanted to ask about specifically is, you had a line in there where you mentioned that recently a dear friend suggested that in writing about you, your daughter, what I'm actually writing about is innocent. Do you think that's true? And to what extent, I guess?
Yeah, that came out of the blue for me. In fact, I was doing an event at I was Manchester Library. It wasn't for the White Mountain. It might have been for, oh man, I can't even remember the book. Oh, it was for my book on Alaska. It was for Mosquito Rain. His name is John Bennett, and he's a good friend of the family. And he came to the event, and afterwards, he came up and he said, he was one of the first persons who actually said to me, because he'd been reading my social media posts. This was year one. This is right. So this would have been, she was like 6 months old, maybe,
Wow,
so he'd
yeah.
been reading my posts. And the first thing he came up and said to me is, you need to write a book about Uma. And I was like, oh, yeah, whatever. Come on. That's, no, my wife would never let me do that. Who wants to read about Uma anyway, And he said, and he just went on, and he like stood there for 10 minutes talking to me about these essays and about that love is innocent, right? There's one of the essays in there where I forgot the name of it, where we're celebrating Dessain with her grandfather, which is one of my favorite essays. Because I come from, I'm going way off on a tangent here, but I promise I'll come back around.
Totally fine.
One of the things that we as a sort of multicultural family are asked often is, what is Uma growing up as? And I always push back against that question, but I understand the question because I come from a Roman Catholic background and Meenakshi comes from a Hindu background, and my answer to that is always, we had a choice really early on to raise her as nothing or raise her as everything. And it felt so obvious to raise her as everything, to have her awash with culture and with food and with religion and with spirituality and with everything that we can get our hands on, in part because myself and my wife are like that, are very interested in sort of, I'm an immersion writer. I like immersing myself in my subject.
I can tell.
Yeah. But also because we knew that she was going to be, she wasn't going to have a choice, because she was going to be engaged with my family and she was going to be engaged with Mina's family. So she had to have it all. She had to be able to input it all. And in the end, what I believe and what her mother believes is that what the sort of spiritual path you follow is irrelevant as long as your destination is just love,
Mm-hmm.
And so when John hit me with that, this is what you're writing about is innocence. It took me a while to figure out what he really meant, because you can go a lot of different directions with that. And I was sort of put off by it, and there was a long line of people, and I was trying to get to the next person, and then I just kept coming back to it, and that's how it came out in that essay. That innocence, the innocence of love, right? Which has nothing to do necessarily with children, or at least it
Right.
shouldn't. It shouldn't
Right.
have only to do with children, right?
Yeah.
It should be something we should all experience, the innocence of love. That it feels like that should be. Maybe the innocence of love should have been the book title, because in a lot of ways that's that is the theme of the book, and I think you really hit it out of the park with that, because it comes early and it's a theme that's repeated over and over and over about and like finding that finding the awesomeness in the everyday is a lot about that too. Being able to see through other people's eyes, or find that connectivity, like that essay that I'm going to read to you about bread. I work a lot. A lot of my writing has to do with connectivity, not just connecting with family or with friends, but connecting with like the human species. That we are all connected in one way or the other, and I like the idea of time not really having a whole lot of relevance, and it's just this big human construct. And if we only look deeply enough, we'd be able to see that my daughter baking bread in her kitchen is the same as some kid in Lebanon baking bread in a stone furnace 15,000 years ago.
Right.
And that's a really specific direct connection. But all we got to do is get rid of these notions of time and culture, and just focus on the innocence of love. And does that make any sense? I went way off on a tangent there. Yeah. So
nope. Actually,
probably just wanted you probably just wanted a yes or no, and I wrote you another essay. Didn't I?
No. Actually, I was hoping you would do exactly what you just did. We're trying to milk free essays out of you, Dan.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like maybe a good time to read that bread one.
Sure. This is one of my favorites.
I like this one. I think we might have run this one on.
Did you run this one?
I think we ran this one because I really liked it.
I'm not gonna read. It's a little bit longer than normal, so I'm not gonna read the whole thing. But it's about I was never I came into bread making late. I don't know if either of you do either of you guys do your family make bread? Do you make homemade bread?
Kelly makes bread.
Does she? Yeah.
So
yeah.
my husband can't eat gluten, so I dabble in gluten-free baking, but it's not really the same.
It's not really the same, is it? And and me either. I never, my mom loved baking, but it was like muffins and cupcakes and things like that. And I never really made bread until I got married, and my wife is a bread maker. My brother-in-law owns a bakery in Austin, Texas, and his bread is like art.
Oh, cool.
And my mother and her father, my wife and her father are both bakers. So the idea of baking bread feels so primally connected to me. And part of it has to do with the fact that I came into it late, right? It's never been part of my life until recently. But also part of it is that there's so much history to bread making itself that I was really interested in the connections of something so basic can make. And so I came home from work, and it turned out my wife and Uma were baking bread together. And this was sort of the first time that Uma was making her own bread. And it struck me as a pretty deep sort of episode. So I'll read the second part of this essay. This is called Bread of Life. Bread is life. So let's see. Growing up in a Roman Catholic neighborhood, in a Roman Catholic family, such abstract practices like mindfulness really weren't much part of my day, unless you count being mindful of putting out the candles as an altar boy before leaving the church. But there was spiritual bread, because there's John 6:35. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. As a young man, I never gave much thought to the Gospels, preferring the razzmatazz of the Old Testament and its brimstone and fire. That's where my namesake was tossed into the den of lions, and where Jonah was swallowed by a whale. Those were stories with action and danger. It took me a long time, after leaving the church, discovering other cultural touchstones, having you, that the concept of bread of life began to resonate more strongly. I recall how often as middle schoolers we would joke about receiving the sacrament of Eucharist and exactly which part of Jesus we were eating when we did. Let's not even open the can of worms that is transubstantiation, baby. That's a conversation for another time. For now, as I watch your little hands roll and flatten, squeeze and tug that tiny ball of dough, it feels like there's something deeper happening. Let's call all of it the sustenance of the soul, yours or mine. I suppose it doesn't matter. Fancy or not, processed and sliced or baked in clay, you are once again following not in a cultural line, but a human one that dates to the dawn of agriculture. There's evidence that humans, little kids I like to imagine in Europe, 30,000 years ago were doing something like what you're doing now. Recently, archaeologists in the Black Desert in Jordan uncovered 2 buildings, 15,000 years old, each containing a large circular stone fireplace within which charred breadcrumbs were found. That wee bit of flour in your hand connects you to our prehistoric ancestors. After time, your little bread ball is removed from the oven, and your mother places it delicately into a piece of aluminum foil to cool. You made that. That's your first bread, baby, I say. You gently place it next to your mother's, as usual, magnificent loaf, and laugh. It's so small. Can we eat it? Of course. I get a knife and gently cut the bread ball into 3 pieces. The crust is very hard because of the size, but inside is soft. And there we stand, in the kitchen of a warm home, in the year 2019, a small family with a small slice of bread, performing a ritual of sustenance and faith that extends far beyond cultural or spiritual boundaries. Daddy, the crust is too hard. You'll get better at it, I say, like your mother, or your grandmother, or whomever was using that fireplace in Jordan. The divine transaction complete, the staff of life consumed, your hands and face chalky with white dust. We complete one more circle, and the universe inches one step closer to perfection.
I love that. One of the things that struck me when putting my notes together for this is that there's so many kind of different aspects of this book that really hit you in a really, really deep. And I keep wanting to say, like, the thing that hit me the most, but it's not really true because there's a bunch of these things. But the thing that hit me the most is, actually, I'm a little inclined to say this because some of this stuff is stuff that I write about myself when it comes to ritual, tradition.
Right.
I think what you do that I haven't really gone into too much myself is that connection between the generations, and you do it directly when it comes to, say, like grandparents to you to your daughter, but there's also all of these kind of references and explorations beyond, way beyond, back and back and back and back. Before you read that, you mentioned the essay celebrating with Uma's grandfather. I think that essay is "What Will You Become?"
Yeah, what will you become? Exactly. Thank you. Right.
Yeah, no problem. I got my notes in front of
That's
me.
That's one of my favorites of the collection.
Yeah, because I had remarked on that one, and the one I believe it's either immediately before it, or maybe two before it, right in that fourth section, water, Madman and Warriors,
Right.
Madman and Warriors, which is another one that I thought was awesome. And if you'll permit me to read a little sentence of your words
sure.
that jumped out at me here.
Okay. Yeah.
Along these lines, which is you wrote, and then this is obviously this is a Halloween-esque.
Yeah.
You say, "We are surrounded, my child, overcome, awash in the slipstream of time, a direct line between jack-o'-lanterns made of carved turnips and carried by children to scare away the witches, and the light-up flower headband you wear, and bubble-making wand you hold. All tools then, as they are now, designed to proclaim your place as a keeper of tradition, a holy prophet of the streets, and a collector of all that is sweet." Now, I mean, that's just a wonderful piece of prose anyway. But the meaning behind that is extremely resonant to me, because this is the substance of life, right? Is all these things that we don't even, like you say, we often don't think about them, right? Especially in the way that they connect us back through time and through generations and through places even, right? Geographically, through different corners of the world. I mean, and actually the traditions that you cite throughout this book are truly global, I mean, they are drawn from a number of different traditions, which again it speaks to who we are, especially in the, hate to be use the trope, but of the melting pot, right? Especially in the USA of the North America of 2020, where it really is a collection of people from many, many traditions coming together to slowly, as it happens over time, form new analogous ones, right?
Yeah.
And so my there is a question buried in here. So I'm not just
I like
rambling.
I like listening to you talk. It's awesome.
But my question is, and I mean, this is a heavy one, so not to totally put you on the spot here, but I really feel like we're in a place right now, and not to overdo the whole like COVID lessons thing, you know what I mean? And actually, based on conversations that you and I have even had, like on Facebook or elsewhere, I have mixed feelings about this subject, right? But it keeps coming up again and again and again that, like, well, what are we going to learn from this, and are we going to live differently from this, and just kind of wrestling with all these things, and like sometimes it feels like people are berating other people, like, you better learn, like this is and some of it to me feels a little bit like Sodom and Gomorrah-ish in a secular way, you know what I mean? It's like you better repent, and I resist that. I am resistant to that flavor of things. But at the same time, as things are in flux, right? I mean, as you know, I think maybe I might have highlighted another passage like this where you talk about the constant of change throughout time, and and that is the case, and we're experiencing that now, I think, in a way that especially those of us who say millennials, I'm an older millennial, people of my age or whatever, we haven't seen a lot of change, besides like 9/11 and the internet, right?
Right.
But like things since then, I mean, things kind of went off kilter from those two things, but in a steady way that's been consistent for 20 years or so, and now everything is in flux. And reading your book, I believe this anyway, but it was a wonderful way to see it expressed that I wouldn't have done myself, right? It seems to me that the consistency and meaning found in ritual and tradition that goes way back could be a great boon for us as we go forward, and as we maybe reassess what we're doing and why we're doing it, and how we cope with it. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, and thoughts on how obviously we're in an early stage, and this is all we're all just throwing shit out there right now, right?
Yeah, right.
But what do you think about that? I mean, you have a really good understanding of this subject.
Yeah, no, I think you're you're spot on. In fact, me and my wife were having a talk just, as I'm sure the two of you do with with your spouses as well. It just feels like there's no resolution anymore to any discussion, right? I mean, how can you plan for anything right? Like, we're like, well, in June I don't know what we're gonna do in June. It depends on what happens here, and it depends on this, and it depends on what we can do this, and so in a sense, like, this is like what Zoe was saying, right? I mean, is this not the ultimate mindfulness? Like, I mean, I know you and I, Chris, had this sort of Facebook talk about, well, can mindfulness be forced, right? Can you force mindfulness?
Right.
And that's a really good question, because this is forced. So I don't know the answer to that, and that's a whole different discussion. But in a lot of ways, this is what we're kind of living day to day here, and a lot of it feels like a lot of the anger that's out there over this, like over something like wearing a mask, which in either direction, right? Which seems like such a stupid thing to be angry about. But I think a lot of that comes from just like we don't, especially as Americans, like we always have like such a grip on where we're going with our life, like we have a plan, right? Americans have a plan, and we don't have any plan right now.
Yeah.
My dad sent me an article today. If it's not forced mindfulness, the article was talking about how all of our sense of time is warped because we're in the eternal present, which is kind of like mindfulness, but like twisted a bit because it is forced, right?
Yeah.
Because we can't really plan for anything.
Right. Well, exactly. Because, right, Chris, I think you may have even mentioned something about this a couple of months ago. Was like, mindfulness shouldn't lead to anxiety, right? Right. That's
the idea.
The idea is, but like that forced present, being forced into the present is really, like, it gives me panic attacks,
Yes.
like, and like if there were, if you pull away the pandemic, right, and if you pull away all the regulations and all the anger and all the junk that's going on out there, but your mindset was the same, it would be like the ultimate in mindfulness, wouldn't it? Because I'd be living in the day and I wouldn't have to worry about what's coming tomorrow. But because I don't have a choice in doing it, that is a whole different, it's confusing, right? Because forced mindfulness is really perplexing. and the three of us sitting here being able to be introspective about it, being aware, right? When you're aware of sort of your mindset, that's a whole different situation than just being angry. They're just like not understanding and just being like, those people want me to wear a mask, but that, what about my freedom, and just and just having these knee-jerk reactions. And I shouldn't criticize one side or the other. There's issues on both sides, but just having that sort of, like, you're having your life upended,
right,
and not being able to sort of sit down and walk through what's happening, internally walk through what's happening, leads to a lot of sort of psychic damage,
But
and I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah.
Well, back to Chris's point a little bit about ritual and connection through the ages, though, when you said, what are we going to do in June? The first thing I thought was, first about all the things that I can't do in June that I was going to do in June. But the second thing I thought was, it's going to be the solstice. It's like that kind of like that's the anchor that we have left.
Yeah, right. You hook onto these things that are there all the time. But in a lot of ways, even those things, like, okay, so there's probably not gonna be a 4th of July, right? I mean,
Yeah.
are we gonna go out in a big crowd and watch
Yeah.
fireworks? That's kind of gone, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, what is Halloween even gonna look like at this point?
Right.
And we already went through that in Easter, right? Like Easter was really messed up this year. Because like we had this egg hunt in our backyard. It was just my kid, and I hid the eggs, and there was, and I'm like, well, she seemed to be fine with it, but I was like all mixed up. It just didn't feel like an anchor to me. It felt like it was almost like a copy of a ritual.
Yeah.
Like it was a little faded, and I couldn't read it exactly right, and so yeah, I think on one hand, I think you're right. I think it's we hook onto those rituals. They become more important, especially in times like this, because what else do we have?
Yeah.
But even those rituals now are different.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe that's part of the challenge too, is to figure out ways to use these rituals as an anchor, and as a thing that steadies us, but without that feeling of like either trying to pretend like it's semi-normal, or on the flip side that just sort of like abandoning it or whatever, or casting it aside because it isn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what's that sweet spot where we can actually do something that feels special, and doesn't just feel like, well, we're going to do a Zoom version of the same thing, because I don't know that that's satisfying.
Yeah. And I totally get that. And we talked about this a lot, Chris. Like I reject both the idea that we are going to snap back to normal. I reject that idea. We are not going to.
Right.
But I also reject the idea that we're heading towards some sort of new normal. Like this is that the three of us sitting here, talking from our couches is now the new normal. I reject that idea too.
Yeah.
And when somebody asked me the other day, well, if you don't believe either of those things, then what is it going to be? And my answer is, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I really don't. There is some middle here that when we come out on the other end of this tunnel, if we ever come out from the other end of this tunnel. But I don't know what that middle is anymore. Maybe I'll know it when I see it. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe this is the normal. Maybe we're here now. I don't know. I mean, Manchester reopened their restaurants today.
Yeah,
there's people on Elm Street, and
do they have Elm Street closed? Did they do that thing? I know they were talking.
No, they're gonna talk about it tomorrow. Yeah, they're talking about it tomorrow. A lot of the restaurant owners, about half want it to happen, about half don't want it. It depends on how much. How big your property is.
We're seeing the exact same dynamic in Peterborough. I think 8 technically opened in some capacity with outside seating, but I think that's about half maybe. And the others basically said that if they can't actually break even, with the distancing and with the downsizing of the operation, it doesn't make sense.
And what's the point?
Yeah.
So I don't know where we'll come out of this. It's funny. I was talking to my publisher the other day, and she said, if we're still in business in 5 years, I want you to do a follow-up to this book when Uma turns 10. And of course, I immediately, I had an anxiety attack because I was like, what the hell am I going to write about right now? I mean,
right.
I've already started thinking about, oh God, year 6 is going to be a disaster.
Right.
Because, basically every essay will be about me and my daughter sitting in our backyard. That's all it's going to be.
Which is, which is quite a contrast from the range of places you travel.
Right.
in this book.
So we'll have to go really deep,
Yeah. Well, and that is interesting that she wants that she said that too, because that just reminds me of the time when I must have been in the middle of reading a bunch of your essays, and I was like, hey, you ever heard of the film Boyhood? And you're like, well, would it surprise you to learn it's one of my favorites? I said, no, not at all.
I love that film. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So I will say though, I think you need to give yourself more credit than that, because you and Uma have been doing those awesome art projects, the dressing up as the famous paintings, and you post a bunch of cool music that you're sharing with her.
Yeah.
And I have one last kind of silly question for you.
Silly.
Which is, I assume that you read plenty of stuff to her that's not just like cool poems. You did a whole pandemic poem series.
Right.
So what are some of your favorite kids' books, and does she agree with you, or do you like fight over your children's literature?
Oh my God, yes, we fight so hard. She does not like Dr. Seuss. It
I don't
kills
either.
me.
I don't like Dr. Seuss.
It kills me that she doesn't like Dr. Seuss, and I try, and it is just not sticking. And you know, when I was growing up, I grew up literally right around the corner from my town library. And my mother would always, and they had these Dr. Seuss hours, right? And there was one whole shelf, and it was at my eye level, right? And it was all Dr. Seuss books, and it was my favorite place in the library. And I would just read these books. Probably drove my mother insane. I would just read Dr. Seuss over and over and over again. I loved Dr. Seuss. And when Uma was born, I mean, literally, like she was like a week old, and I just went out and like I bought like 20 Dr. Seuss books. I was like, oh, you know, when you're old enough, this is gonna be us. We're gonna read Dr. Seuss, but she is not interested at all in Dr. I'm gonna keep trying, but we'll see. You know, generally speaking, I think you and I talked a little bit about this, though. I very much am. You know, we're not homeschoolers, but I very much believe in sort of deep learning. Like I don't want to push her to learn something that she's not interested in. I mean, obviously, there's things she has to learn, but I see my role more as a facilitation than as a teacher. Like if she expresses an interest in something, then then we're going to go really deep on that thing that she expresses an interest. Because why swim against the tide? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
I don't think anyone can really learn anything that way. Honestly.
Yeah, you know. So books. She's a really big fan of what's her name? Matthew. There's a whole series of books about the fairies. It's like the whole fairies books, and it's like the Fairyville. And there's these two girls, Rachel and Allison, and they're like friends of the fairies. And they're beginning reader books, so she can't read them yet, but she likes me reading them to her, and there's pictures, and she loves those books, and they drive me insane. I'm not a really big fan of them. But because of those books, you know, we went outside, and she built this huge fairy castle out in the backyard. And then we talked to our next door neighbor, and our next door neighbor has this tree, and we like built a little door and with windows, and like there's this fairy house in this tree. And she goes out and she leaves flowers. So I'm trying to use her interests as a way to get her involved in, you know, in nature and the love of learning and, you know, all that type. You know how that goes. What else does she like? She likes My Little Ponies with a passion that is borderline psychotic. She so much so. Did I ever show you the picture of she actually last June we went to our first comic book convention in Nashua. They actually have a kids con. It was canceled this year, which is really disappointing. But she dressed like Twilight Sparkle. Oh, I'm sorry,
really?
Rainbow Dash. She dressed like Rainbow Dash.
I don't think I saw that.
It was. I'll send you the pictures. It was really something, and it was really amazing for her because everyone at the convention, like from Batman to the Flash to Wonder Woman, they just addressed her as Rainbow Dash.
Oh,
you know, like she would walk in and they'd be like, "Hey, Rainbow Dash, how's it going?" So like she took this persona and she just ran with it.
Awesome.
So that was kind of cool to see. So she likes those books and she likes those cartoons. Anything to do with like mythological creatures, alicorns, unicorns, dragons. You know, that's what the whole book is about. Trolls, all of that stuff. She loves all of that sort of high fantasy stuff. So, but I do want to tell you something though. The very first book that I read to her, over the course of 1 month, this is the first month of her life, was Moby Dick. I read.
Are you serious?
Wow.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that as a joke.
I know. I read Moby Dick out loud to her.
And it only took a month.
And it only took a month. It only took me a month.
That was my first thought. Was like a month. Wow,
Yeah.
you must have been doing nothing else.
Well,
Like you said that you weren't. Right?
I wasn't doing anything else. Yeah. So,
Perfect newborn reading.
right.
That's awesome.
And now she's really into. I mean, I don't think it has. She was only a month old. I don't think it has anything to do with it. But she really likes sharks. She really likes like ocean stuff.
Yeah.
So we watch. the Atlantic Great White Conservancy in Massachusetts has, during this whole isolation thing, has been doing a daily story time where they read books about sharks, and you do, like, we make sharks out of like toilet paper rolls, and so she's really interested in the ocean and in starfish and in fish and things like that. So that's, again, so I try to find her a lot of books that have to do with that, because I want her to read, but I want to figure out what she's interested in first, and then I'll find the books that have to do with what she's. How about you? What
like it might be time to read Moby Dick again.
I know, right? Right? It'll be the fourth time that I've read it. I've read it 3 times.
I mean, aloud to her again.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if she allows. We're into fairies, Zoe. Come on.
Just tell her the fairy's coming in the next chapter.
Yeah. The chapter about knots.
Yeah. So Dan, you put this book together. It's coming out. White Mountain was 2 years ago. And this might be a little bit mean to ask, because I know, if I remember right, before you settled on kind of putting this together, you had a number of pokers in the fire. But I got to ask it anyways. What's next? What do you think?
Yeah, well, what was going to happen with this book was I had, between its release on June 2nd and Father's Day, which is June 21st. So that's 19 days. I had 18 events in 19 days scheduled for the tour for this book. And all 18 of those events have gone away.
Yeah.
So
are any of them trying to do it virtually?
Yeah. So we're going to do I have about 10 that I'm going to do virtually, and I'm going to be putting that schedule out in a little bit. So, we're going to do what we can. Going to do a lot of pre-sales and reach as many people as we can, like this, because what else can I do? And then, I have a bunch of events, in-person events scheduled for the fall. We'll see if that happens.
Hopefully.
I don't know, there like I do a lot of the work that I do at retirement communities and nursing homes, and that's all gone. So that's not going to be happening for a while. But the libraries, you never know. Bookstores, perhaps there might still be some events that are happening. But really, I'm just I'm sort of switching gears to doing a lot of freelancing. After this book comes out, we'll do a mini tour for it. I'll try to sell quite as much as I can digitally. I think there'll be another rush for the book come the holidays, like the Christmas holidays. So I'll probably have a whole bunch of events lined up then. And then I'm a contributing editor for Appalachia Journal and for AMC, so I'm doing some work for them, and I have a bunch of articles coming out for them and a lot of freelance stuff that's happening. The next book, though, it'll be interesting because I don't know, we're still working out how I'm going to be able to do it. I'm writing a book on the history of New Hampshire Fire Tower, history of and interviews with some of the old fire tower guys, and part of that book was me visiting all the fire towers with Uma, was hiking up and visiting all the fire towers with Uma. And we're lucky in that most of them are sort of obscure trails, and they're usually not busy, and there's not a lot of crowds that go out there. So I think we're still going to try to do that. But it's hard for me because I'm very much I'm very hands-on when it comes to research. I don't like just sitting in front of a laptop or in a library. I like tracking people down and like going out like on a work day with people and things like that and really getting into their lives. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do a lot of that.
That's hard.
So, we'll see how it goes. But hopefully if it goes well, that book will come out in the spring of next year. And then in the spring of 2022, I have a book on World War II at the summit of Mount Washington.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Because basically, a lot of people don't realize it was actually just declassified in the late 1960s and early 1970s. A lot of people don't realize that the military, the Navy and the Army, took over the summit of Mount Washington. And for about 4 years, they did all of these high-altitude de-icing and spotlight and tracking enemy planes and radar tests at the summit of Mount Washington. Mount Washington essentially closed for those 4 years, and the auto road would have gone out of business if they didn't rent the space out to the military.
Wow.
So there's all this stuff that happened up there that people don't realize happened up there. Like General Electric built this enormous spotlight up at the summit. They called it a cloud piercer. to try to track enemy planes in the clouds. So there's all this really cool, crazy stuff that happened up there. So and as near as I can tell, there's no book written about it. So that'll be the project in 2 years.
That's awesome. Never heard of it. That's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And there's still quite a few, not quite a few, but there's still a fair amount of veterans who are still alive who actually worked them. So we'll be interviewing them and talking about some of it.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, I'm glad to hear you got all this stuff in the works. So we'll be promoting your books for years to come.
I hope so. I want to get out in front of people. It's just hard. I don't know. I know you are, Chris. I don't know, Zoe. Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
I don't know if I like that question. Because I like.
It depends on the audience, right? Yeah.
Well, I like being around. I mean, I'm one of those introverts that needs recharge time, but I like being around people. I like hanging around people, and I miss it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I like performing. I like being in front of people. I mean, first world problem, right? But it's still tough.
But at the same time, that direct connection of people to people, whether you're up performing or whether you're just sitting across the table. I mean, it's kind of a fundamental thing that's missing,
it means something. Yeah.
It does mean something.
Universal and fundamental.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate you helping, with our conversations, with our,
this is great.
Work we've tried to do here. We were actually together basically at the last event there ever was before the pandemic.
It was, yes. That was the last event that I did until this all happened.
We did that one we got that one in at the library, and then everything kind of shut down.
Yep.
So maybe we'll have to try to find a way to bookend it.
Right.
If things ever, if we get to the point where we can have some sort of public gatherings, we'll try to do that.
Socially distant. You put somebody up top, and then you surround them 6 feet apart down below, and
Well, what's kind of funny in a slightly sad way, I'm laughing about it now because we're 2 months into this, and I'm not as upset as I used to be. But when we went into 2020 and we were doing our Monadnock Underground 2020 plans, right? So the podcast is like top of the list of what kind of the focus of the year is, but the number one focus of the year by the end of the year was going to be expanding into lots of in-person events. And so that was one of those, God hears you making plans kind of thing. It's like 2020, it's going to be the year where we are in person doing stuff all the time. And then we're going to do bigger ones in 2021. And we get to use this.
Well, I tried doing, try doing some Zooms, try doing some events like this, like sponsored by the Monadnock Underground. I mean, you got to work with what you got, right?
Yeah. And that is the kind of thing we're going to be looking at doing, for sure. For sure, especially as the podcast gets going. Hopefully we get a little base of listeners that wants to do something a little bit more interactive, and then we can make that.
Well, hey, anytime you pick up the phone and just tell me where to sign on.
Well, I appreciate that, and I want to thank you for being our first guest, of course, and for being so supportive of us. But the other thing is, I think we'll probably do a few early episodes with single guests. But as the season goes on, I think we might end up having some author roundtables where we
that would be awesome.
5, 6 MU writers to come on and talk about a particular topic or something like that, just for a little 45-minute discussion or something. Would love to have you be a part of one or more.
Anything you say the word.
Yeah. Well, hey man, really appreciate it. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you both so much. We'll talk soon.
You and Me. Reflections on Becoming Your Dad comes out June 2nd. You can get it from Hobblebush Books now. If the episode comes out before then, you can get it anywhere without going inside afterwards. So thanks again, Dan, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Zoe.
This is Story Time with the Wizard of Monadnock. All right, everyone out there, gather round. Refresh your drinks, light up whatever you got, get comfortable. This is Story Time. All this time listening to those Robert Hunter words, the storyteller makes no choice. And I didn't realize until recently that they're sometimes meant quite literally. Not that I don't actually like telling stories, mind you, but the fact is, I'm not actually here by choice. Don't take it personally. I'm not even upset about it. I always knew this was a possibility. I was taking a risk back in 2012 when I unilaterally declared myself Wizard of Monadnock. And I know how that sounds, but I swear this wasn't a power grab. I mean, not that I wouldn't do a power grab, but what power is there actually to grab here? You know, I mean, you'd be surprised at how few perks there are for being Wizard of Monadnock. No, I just had this sense that the mountain and the region that bears its name by rights should have a wizard. And as far as I could tell, or legally speaking, upon information and belief, nobody occupied the role. Assuming this to be true, it seemed like the role could be considered available to anyone willing to make a good faith attempt at fulfilling it, regardless of formal qualifications. This assessment I made was very fortunate for myself, because I, of course, had no credentials. And the truth is, whether or not I actually have credentials now is very much up for debate in certain circles, but we can save that story for another time. Anyway, however noble I felt my intentions, I knew that there were two major risks. The first one is the obvious one, that I'd been wrong, and someone else was already the Wizard of Monadnock, and that person would undoubtedly be pissed off, to some degree. I would be pissed. Now, it's been 8 years, though, and nobody's come to claim or complain, so I generally assume we're safe in this regard. And in any case, I probably wouldn't accept any such claim or grievance at this point, at this late hour. Whoever they are, they've been derelict, invisible, absent for so long that I'd argue my claim on the basis of use and development alone. The land, in other words, is mine by virtue of the fact that I've been on it and working it. The second risk, however, was that the job would come with requirements of which I had no way of knowing and thus could in no way be certain of fulfilling, or even certain that I'm prepared and able to fulfill. Well, it turns out, in a little-known section of New Hampshire's RSA, now not the one you can find online, but the complete one that you can only view at the State House in Concord, says that any currently operating regional wizard must provide a certain amount of tale spinning and myth making for the people of that region on an annual basis. Now, this was only called to my attention recently, and by none other than our illustrious and Norman Rockwell-designed town moderator, a retired judge who knows the legal code like nobody else in the past 6 generations. Now, fortunately, I write a fair amount. I used to do a little podcast show of my own, and in the course of doing so, I certainly did some of my required storytelling, writing too. But alas, my hours have, it turns out, always fallen far short on that annual basis. And after 8 years, after 8 annual bases, you do the math. That shit adds up. So here I am, doing my makeup hours, which by some calculations will take at least the next 10 years to fully complete. That's what we're doing here. So you're kind of stuck with me and my ramblings for a long time. That's why I told you to get comfortable. Seriously. Pour the drinks, dim the lights, all that stuff. Now, some might want to hear these stories by a crackling fire, but I also highly recommend a sunken living room covered in soft carpet, if you can find that sort of thing. Like I said, I don't mind telling stories, and sometimes I do it anyway. Being forced to do it is actually a good thing for me, even if I never actually like being forced to do much of anything at all. Fact is, on the one hand, I don't need another thing added to my plate. I never do. But on the other, if I'm really being honest, I got to admit, in this case, the law is right. It's a good law. I should be telling stories. Especially now, right? In times like these, isn't a good storyteller needed maybe more than ever? This is fun, even for me. Not COVID, but this, telling the stories. With all the time I spend writing things like essays and sermons, making points and arguments and all that. And Christ, you can even lump my uncontrollably combative Facebook posts into the mix. This is an awesome chance to just kind of let my hair down and shake it out. I'm not here to convince you of anything, teach you a lesson, or even make any kind of broader comment about society. Seriously. I'm just here to tell stories, to entertain, to mildly amuse, what have you. And you know what? Maybe it wouldn't surprise you to learn that I have a lot of stories. A lot of stories just my own, and a whole bunch more stories that I can draw on from other sources. So yeah, bam, just like that. I already got you. You didn't even realize it, but that was your first story, a story about thinking about storytelling. But okay, all right, let's move that off to the side. I got you. Let's move that off to the side. What's good? What's entertaining right now? Well, what do people want to hear? I know what people always want to hear about, and you're probably no different. You want to hear about the time I saw 3 UFOs, or that other time that I controlled lightning in a thunderstorm on the beach. I mean, am I wrong? I can see you all nodding through the internet. But you can't expect me to be that easy. I'm an accommodating and hospitable guy. I'm an accommodating and hospitable wizard. But that's like just giving away the store right out of the gate. I lead off with the UFO story, and how do I follow that? What do you have to look forward to? No. I know better than that. Now, we're going to start with the small beans. And the small beans taste awesome. Make no mistake about that. And then, and only then, we'll work our way up, and we'll see how far we can get. The post-colonial story of this land begins with feudalism and wolves, as all good stories do. Starting way back in 1629, this whole hunk of New Hampshire, beyond being the home to a complex network of roving, interconnected tribes who had by this point already been decimated by European livestock diseases, was part of a big English royal land parcel. And there were wolves here. They lived here. Now, these days we worry about bears, at least I worry about bears, no matter how many times people explain to me that they don't kill anybody here. But back then, there were wolves. There were wolves to worry about. Now, of course, seriously, you can test me on this. Bring up wolves to any diehard, multi-generation, good work ethic New Hampshireite, and you will find that this is nearly as controversial a subject as the great mountain lion debate. Now, leaving that aside for now, stick with the wolf thing. Officially, wolves were extirpated from New Hampshire a little over 200 years ago. That's a cool word, isn't it? It means basically extinct within an area. Like wolves aren't extinct because they still exist in other places, but they don't live here and they don't visit here. Extirpated. But some people claim, nonetheless, that this isn't true, especially in the North Country. They point to trail camera evidence. Anecdotally, my buddy PJ has claimed for over a decade now that he once saw a whole pack of wolves walking behind his condo complex right in Keene. Now, while I still can't decide if I believe him, the truth is he's always been a very reliable narrator. He's more often than not, and more often than most of you. I'll tell you that much. But Fish and Game, New Hampshire Fish and Game. In other words, the government insists that there are no wolves and that the trail cameras, and probably PJ, are seeing coyotes or some kind of blasphemous hybrid of coyote and dog. Now, that's another thing. Some call such a creature a coy dog, quote unquote. And this is also controversial because some people on both sides of the wolf debate, no less, both sides, will argue very strongly that coy dogs don't exist either. This is very confusing. New Hampshire is more complicated than you would think, guys. But the fact remains that from here, there's only two possibilities. There's only two possible reasons why Fish and Game would say that there are no wolves. One is that there aren't any wolves. I mean, they're telling the truth. That's possible. The other is that there are some wolves, but they don't want to deal with it. And if they admit that the wolves are real, then they will have to then deal with it. And I'm not going to pretend like I understand everything that's involved, but I'm sure there's all manner of, endangered species regulations, which is all fine and good. But, one might imagine why a Fish and Game department might be reluctant to embark on such an endeavor, especially if they're not very well funded to begin with, which is probably the case. Anyway, back in the day, the only regulation was that everyone was supposed to murder all the wolves. That was the regulation. Murder those things. Now, for over 100 years, the king, 100 years, presumably more than one king, didn't do much more than own this hunk of land. I wonder sometimes. I wonder how it made him feel to own it. If he noticed a difference in feeling temperament or satisfaction from waking up in the morning and knowing that there was a place called New Hampshire and that it was his or hers. There might have been queens during that time. Actually, Christ, now that I think about it, Oliver Cromwell must have owned New Hampshire for a hot minute. Think about that. Oliver Cromwell. But anyway, no king or general or prime minister ever came here. And given the shortage of cameras during this period, it's unlikely that anyone ever even brought them a picture of it. Maybe a sketch of some trees, but what is that to a monarch? An emperor, basically. Eventually, though, in the wet and wild 1700s, the area came to resemble less of a medieval estate and more of the colonial America we've come to know and love. For 100 years, all manner of English weirdos had begun to arrive on the New England coast, expanding out into what's now Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and eventually places like New Hampshire and Maine. Connecticut. We don't like to talk about Connecticut, but Connecticut. They actually before they came here specifically to what's now the Monadnock region, they first settled west of here, setting up trading posts and forts along the Connecticut River, and then slowly you got these settlements on the east and settlements in the west, and they eventually crept towards the middle, and that marked the genesis of our strange little society that we have here. All of the trees were cut down, and everyone had sheep. You know who eats sheep? You know who eats sheep. Wolves eat sheep. And the response, as I said, was to murder the wolves. Kill them. There are countless stories of wolf hunts, growing even more dramatic as the wolf population no doubt dwindled to close to nothing. Eventually, the discovery of just one or two of these wild dog cousins could mean the marshaling of every farmer from 3 towns to chase it until the job was done. More than once, the chase led to the mountain. Yes, the mountain. Once they came to believe the wolves were holed up at the top of Monadnock, making their last stand on the holy high ground, as it were. So the men rushed up there, only to find a mother bear. Their bear connection again. A mother bear and her baby. And like savages, they decided to steal the cub, which then bit off the finger of the teenager carrying it. Don't mess with bears. This is why they're coming for us, man. Now, these English or formerly English weirdos, they were definitely weird either way. They seem to have an affinity for what today we might call the nuclear option, which is funny since nuclear weapons wouldn't be invented for another century and a half or so. But the nuclear option. Remember how I said that the wolves were extirpated from New Hampshire in the early 1800s? Well, let me tell you what that extirpation looked like around here. They set the goddamn mountain on fire. Like, you know what? We can't find those goddamn things, so let's just burn a mountain. Burn it. We'll burn the fuck out of it. We'll burn it so bad that the soil gets scorched right off the top. I mean, what could go wrong with that? Can you imagine? Can you imagine thinking that way? What possible problem would lead you to set a mountain on? I don't know. And they did this more than once. They did more than once, at least twice. Big, the whole mountain burning on fire. The way they tell it, the fires raged for days or weeks, making the sky glow at night and filling the air with smoke in the daytime. They burned the top of the whole mountain. Now, a lot of people assume Monadnock is bare at the top because you go, quote unquote, like above the tree line, but that's ridiculous. It's only 3,000 feet high, and there is no tree line from that altitude, just from arson. 200-year-old arson, and 200 some odd years later, it's still like that. And there's no wolves, at least officially. So as far as we know, as far as Fish and Game is willing to tell us, the play succeeded. I mean, nuclear options work, for better or worse. But anyways, these ones, these are just the stories that anybody can find in any local book at the Toadstool. These are in the old town histories that nobody reads. They're full of them. And that's why this is the small beans. That's why we're just scratching the surface. We're just getting started. There's a whole lot that people don't know. The early stories failed to adequately explain even obvious spiritual phenomena, like the fact that Monadnock is an unusually holy, consecrated, or magical place, whichever term you prefer. There's general consensus on that. Or the notion that Keene is controlled by one or more evil demons, like cursed little city. These are things that we intuitively sense, we know, we may hear word of mouth tales about them. At least I certainly do. But the old stories don't explain them, and most of the news stories that people know don't either. You can only really know these from like deep study, which almost always involves direct experience, or like I said, from knowing the right people and getting them to talk, and that's not easy. These old Yankee types can be all like omerta sometimes about this stuff. Like you wouldn't even believe it. But the truth is, you need both. The internal sensation of it isn't enough without verification from outside sources, and if you just hear someone tell you that Keene is evil, but you've never experienced that, are you just going to take their word for it? I hope not. I wouldn't. In the meantime, though, you've got me, and you can believe me or not. That's kind of immaterial to me. Like I said, I'm here to entertain. But the fact is, you've got things you want to know, and I've got hours that I need to log, required by law, in order to tell it to you. And that's what we've done here tonight, and that's what we're going to do going forward. This is all the small beans you get this time, though. Next time, we'll see. Maybe we can throw a couple hunks of hot dog in the casserole. And for now, that's our show. We want to thank the cast of Healer Wars, the great Dan Cesny, and all the great writers and collaborators that make Monadnock Underground possible. Visit our website at monadnockunderground.com. Get tempted by our Patreon at patreon.com/monadnockunderground, or at the very least, do the lazy thing and give us a like on Facebook. Until next time.